Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome in to the Gramlich and McLean podcast. Happy National Championship Day to all who celebrate. That's my new favorite thing. I just say to all who celebrate for everything. I feel like every red-blooded American person is going to celebrate that today is the national championship game between TCU and Georgia. And
can I ask your thoughts on that real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask your thoughts on a Monday national championship?
Oh, I hate it.
I don't know.
Hate it.
I think it's been since the playoff, but why?
Hate it.
I get the NFL
why
thing.
is
Let's work it out.
because I think they're not having Monday Night Football, so they're already thinking, if you're ESPN, you're thinking, okay, people are used to tuning from Monday Night Football. We'll maybe get some NFL audience who don't care as much about college football. I think Monday's a really good night for TV in general because people don't do stuff on Monday night generally. So that's what TV's thinking.
So
I despise it.
You said you're in.
I despise it. I think it should be on a Saturday like everything else. You play NFL football on Sunday, most of it, and you play your Super Bowl on Sunday. I think you should do the same for college football. But TV's going to reign supreme. At least it doesn't start, it starts late, but at least it doesn't start at 9:30 like the men's basketball championship does on Monday. That's at least a positive matter.
I just think it's a little sign of weakness, to be honest. You don't think that you can hang on a Saturday night for a national championship? Whatever. If that's what you want to do.
It should have been 2 days ago on Saturday, right?
I hate it. I can't stand it. Anyway,
I know.
Proceed. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, the other thing I was going to say, and I think this national championship is really interesting because for the first time probably since 2015, the game you played in, Mike, that Clemson lost, but Clemson was there. And I think that was before people started to get tired of Clemson, dislike Clemson, whatever. The nation, if you weren't a Bama fan, you were probably rooting for Clemson. You wanted to see the underdog win. I think this is the first time since that game where we truly have that. If you're not a Georgia fan, you're probably rooting for TCU. You want to see the underdog win. That's the vibe I get nationally, and that's how I feel. I don't like Georgia. I think most Clemson people don't like Georgia. There's nothing really likable about them. And I'm from Texas. I like TCU. I have some family that's gone to TCU. And I think this would just be so good for the sport to see a team like TCU that doesn't have billions of NIL dollars, that doesn't recruit super well, to win a national title. That would be really cool. So I'm all in on the Horny Toads. Go Frogs.
That's a very interesting, thought process. I kind of think of it from a college football hierarchy thing too. Like if Georgia gets this back-to-back natty, like that's some rare air. There's only, I think, 4 other teams ever in the poll era that have done that. And so man, that's impressive. And it's probably arguably harder now that you have to play a game before to get to this game. So man, that puts Georgia like up there. And so that's a dangerous spot. And of course,
which we don't like.
And Clemson people, that's our recruiting territory, all these different things. If TCU wins it, I don't think anything changes. It doesn't do anything. It's a blip on the college football historic time that has no importance to next year at all. I don't think it does anything. So it's fascinating to look at this game from a couple of different angles. The Georgia thing is weird for me. If you talk to my father-in-law, hates Georgia, can't stand them, like literally despises them. I love playing Georgia. I would rather play, close your ears, Clemson fans. I would rather play Georgia every year than South Carolina. They're better. I know we just lost. It's hard for me to say that. They're closer almost. I don't think they're closer.
They are closer, I would say.
They are closer. There you go. I just love that game. So I would love that. And I really like Kirby Smart. I think he is a heck of a coach. I think that he is right now in this world of being this authoritarian, but also kind of having that Dabo-ish stuff in him. He's like dead in the middle to me, it feels like. And he plays the game so well. He does the NIL, he does the recruiting, he does the transfer portal. Like he's ready for this. And he is Georgia. He went there, played there, did all that stuff, and I know that's really cool. With all that said, I hope TCU wins by 1 million.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say you were fine with Georgia winning.
No.
Good, Matt. Gosh, I was getting a little worried about you. I also think this would be hilarious if the offseason before Texas and Oklahoma announced they're leaving the Big 12.
Yeah.
Texas and Oklahoma are nowhere near the national title. The Big 12 wins a national title with the Frogs. You just Like, you can't write this. This is college football, and I would be happy for the Big 12.
Absolutely.
With what they've gone through with Texas and OU. I mean, honestly, for lack of a better term, screwing them over.
Sure.
It would just be really cool, I think, for the Big 12 overall. And from an ACC perspective, the last thing we need is another SEC title. Like, come on. You don't need that. No one wants that.
That's right. But you know what people do want, KG? They want stocks from our great partner over at Rock'em.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Great point, Mac. Rock'emSocks.com, the world's largest sock store. Yes, I said the world. They have everything. They have over 10,000 different designs. They've got your favorite pro teams. They've got every single school, every ACC school, TCU, Georgia, if you're one of those fans. Playoff socks. TCU, if you lose, you could still buy some playoff socks because you made the playoff. So they have everything you could ever need at Rock'emSocks.com.
Come on, KG, let's go. The Grambling and McElwain listeners, do me a favor right now. If you're tuning in, if you're watching us or listening to us, go over to Rock'emSocks.com. Get everything you want. Load it up. Load it up. And then there's this cool little thing at checkout that's asked for a promo code. Type in GML20. We're going to save you 20%. Really appreciate Rock'em for doing this partnership with us. Go get all the socks that you can ever think of. They've got them all. And, maybe it'll be your new lucky game day socks that will project your team to many wins in the future.
Perfect. That's what these socks, actually, that's a Grambling guarantee. If you buy socks from your team, they will win. They will make the playoff next year. That's a guarantee.
Wow. There you go.
You're welcome. Mac, you had to do this interview solo just because you're the best, but I was busy with basketball stuff. I couldn't get away, but I'm so glad you did because I know you and Cole Cubelic were able to just nerd out about offensive line stuff.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Let me tell you.
So I know you enjoyed this interview.
When two offensive linemen get in the same room, scary things can happen. Not only
I wasn't even invited, honestly.
Not only can we solve a bunch of world problems, but we'll also talk a little football too. So it was impressive. Two bald guys. I think it's the first time. I'll have to go back and check. Two bald guys on the team. Maybe. I'll do some fact checking.
There's got to be a coach that's bald, right?
Maybe.
We'll look it up.
We got good heads of hair in the ACC. That is just a fact. But it was super fun. Really appreciative for Cole's time. His insight obviously covers the SEC better than anybody and does it all year long. But also outside of the college football landscape. This dude's all over the place. Really fun to sit down with him and talk this national championship. I think you're going to like his thoughts. Let's get right to it. Cole Cubelic, man, thank you so much for joining us today. Partner is busy. Listen, I just got done with football season. Kelly Grambling now in the middle of her basketball season. So she's doing much more important things, but I appreciate you making some time and joining us today.
Absolutely. Eric, I appreciate you having me. Not going to be as much fun with just you, but I'm sure we'll figure it out.
A couple offensive linemen talking football. I mean, that's boring. Nobody wants to hear that. But the stage is set, and we've got a national championship. And I think and the Georgia Bulldogs, a lot of people expected them to be here. I mean, I remember seeing them week one obliterating Oregon. I'm just like, okay, well, this is easy. The season's over. And then they stumble a little bit, a couple of games, but ultimately looked great all season long. And then you have a team who I don't think a lot of people at all expected to be here. Unranked going into the season, first-year head coach. You got a quarterback who gets injured. Now there's some guy named Max Duggan coming in that no one knows who he is in TCU. But let's just start on the Georgia side because, again, I mentioned all those great things that they've done, blowing people out. What did you see from them all year long that you just knew, okay, that this is happening, it's inevitable?
Yeah, I think there's two things, and there are a lot of things about this Georgia team that aren't as much as last year's were. And Tom and Jordan and I, my television crew, we had their spring game going into the national championship season. And I remember walking away from that game thinking, first off, I was really impressed with JT Daniels. And I know that hasn't worked out, but I kind of thought, wow, if this kid is what he is, giving us the perception that he is, they're going to take a step. And then two, the other thing that I came away from is physically, this team is going to be so imposing in so many different areas that I just don't know who matches up with them. And they were a little more so last year than this year. Darnell Washington was there. It was my first real look at him. And I remember when we sat down with Kirby going in, I was like, Kirby, I love this freshman tight end. Like, he at least tries to block. Like, he'll give you the effort. I was like, and he goes like, no, he's willing. He takes it serious. He likes that, which we just don't see a ton of that, especially with younger tight ends. And I was like, what is this? Is he really like 270? And Kirby kind of sits back and laughs. He goes like, Cole, he's 285. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? And then you see him in person, and it's like he's got a linebacker waist, he's got left tackle shoulders, and like defensive end ankles, and you're just like, nah, that can't be real. And then you see him hurdle people and get out on screens. Then at that point they had Adam Anderson playing star. He was 6'5", 245. I'm like, and I remember walking up to Muschamp. I'm like, y'all ain't playing that kid at star. And he's like, Cole, he can run, and like he'll do it. Then you see Jordan Davis and Devonta Wyatt. Then you see Amarius Mims, when God made offensive tackle, like Amarius Mims is the one that you look at and say, like, fingertips past the kneecaps, little bitty waist, giant rear end, like, can pull his shirt up under his pads and not be embarrassingly fat like you and I would be. You're just like, wow. So I just thought physically, who's going to be able to manage this? And I think they still have a lot of that. The offensive line, big physical. Obviously, Jalen Carter in the middle of that defense, big physical. They can go multiple tight ends, and Washington's a mismatch for anybody. Bowers becomes that a little bit because they play him as kind of a running back receiver, in somewhat of a tight end body. So I still think they bring a lot of that to the table. And then now you add to the mix a quarterback that can do it all. And what I think is different about Georgia this year as opposed to the last few years, and talking to Monken in that spring game, he reiterated time and time again, explosive plays, explosive plays, explosive plays. They were just doing everything they could to become more explosive. Now I think the tough part with this offense is, Eric, they give you everything. They run inside zone, outside zone, split zone. They run counter. They run power. They run duo. Then they get to the screen game, traditional running back screens, wide receiver screens, in the slot, out wide. They have all these tight ends that can line up in different places. So here come the formations that they can overwhelm you with. Then you go to the protection piece of it, extra tight ends to help in protection. The backs are big and physical. They can help. And then you have a quarterback that can manage all that, who, by the way, you can add a quarterback run with, and he has escapability, and he does a good job keeping his eyes down the field and scramble drill, and you got to find ways to defend that. You have to defend almost everything. Oh, and they can up the tempo a little bit when they want to as well. So physically they can overwhelm you, and then they have everything in the book that you have to defend, and they can do it different ways. I think the Ohio State game was a perfect example. First 12 plays, shotgun. And then what happens a little bit later, you see underneath, and a duo to the left side goes for like 60-something yards. Then they hit an inside zone to the other side. That goes out because they force Ohio State to get a little bit light in the box. There's nothing they're bad at offensively, nothing. And now the receiver room is as healthy as it's ever been, and it just makes it tough to deal with. And then obviously on defense, guys who can run, guys who can physically outmatch you, and they play a tough scheme, that's difficult to manage. They've had some letdowns in the back end the last two games, but you throw all that together with elite talent, and it's just a lot to deal with.
It is. And that's what we saw all year long, and a lot of different points there. We're going to kind of ping pong back and forth between TCU and Georgia, and kind of dive into each of those kind of position groups that you mentioned there. But a lot to like about Georgia, and I thought it was weird when they were, I don't know if exposed or had an off day is probably the better way to do it. I mean, against a Kent State team, against Missouri, and then maybe a little letdown with, Kentucky. But other than that, man, just the standard that they played at all year long for the last 2 years, and maybe even 3, if you look at, that COVID year as well, it's been super impressive. And I'm going to ask you about Kirby and kind of where he ends up in all of this at the very end. But let's move over to TCU for a second. Now, they're the Horned Frogs, but their mascot's a horned lizard. I got to know your thoughts on that, because it's a little bit, they're lying to people a little bit.
A little bit, and then you get this whole Hypnotoad craze.
Right, where did that come from?
Well, I was out there in Arizona, and that thing shows up on the big screen, and Taylor Lewan's losing his mind. He's like, "Why is that toad staring at me? And why is it, like tie dye? I don't. It's just, I think they're just kind of trying to deflect attention from a lot of things, like to make you pay attention to the fact that this is a first-year coach. This is a quarterback that wasn't the original starter. This is TCU, and they're not supposed to be here. And now they start paying attention to all that stuff. It's just another way to have fun.
That's right.
And that's what I think is a big reason for why they're here. Is you watch, because a lot of these guys on defense, it's the same cast of characters that were there last year.
Yeah.
And it's not just that the scheme is different. It's the way they play is different. I mean, they haul ass everywhere. No regard for their body. Like 190 pounds, doesn't matter. Come take on a guard. Like 200 pounds, that's fine. Like fly downfield, get north and south. I just think a lot of that is sort of the personality of this team is like, we're different, we're weird, we're not supposed to be this, so who cares? Like, we'll figure it out one way or the other. Obviously, quarterback, same way. He's not afraid to take a hit. He's not afraid to try to run somebody over. So that's just, I think it's kind of their personality. It's like, a lot of this doesn't make sense, but it's really good when you actually dive into it.
And it keeps happening. And, kind of, similar to Georgia, but just exacerbated a bit. I mean, they're like a cat with 9 lives. I mean, there were 4 or 5 games, maybe even more than that they should have lost, but they found ways to win. And one of the more impressive ones, that Baylor game, where they're operating at such a high level, get that special teams unit on, kick that field goal. The Michigan game, I mean, everything that we had heard all week long is Michigan is going to physically dominate these guys. They're going to blow over them. The Big 12 doesn't have anything like this. And what did we see? We saw TCU, flex their muscles and really play well.
Yeah, I raised my hand because I was one of the guys saying that.
Oh, you?
I was wrong. I thought
I wasn't on any platform to go out and say that, but I certainly thought. I thought Michigan might be the best team in this playoff, and joke's on me.
Oh, I was. If you go rewatch that megacast with AQ Shipley and RG3 and Taylor 1, I was pissed. I was like, run inside zone 100 times. Right. What are we doing?
Right.
Like, what is happening here? Run. Yeah. If that doesn't work, run duo 80 times. Yes. And then figure it out after that. Quit running reverses and flea flicker. I mean, what is happening?
What are you doing?
But I'm not sure.
I mean, they bolo them for 50 yards. I mean, inside zone. See you later.
Yeah, like a little lead play and a little insert with that fullback H-back, and it was out the gate. So I don't know if it would have just worked, but by God, that's what I wanted to attempt to work, and I made it pretty clear on the broadcast. I didn't like it. They are. It's wild, man. I mean, like I do, that defense is just a bear. And I'm not talking about the personnel they have or the actual players they have. I'm talking about the structure of it.
Yeah.
Mississippi State ran it when I was in school. Joe Lee Dunn ran it, and it is designed to make you wrong, and it makes you wrong a lot.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, I think they have a coach that's just really cool, really laid back. Players love him. He's relatable. And they have a system that's fun. Like, the receivers love it, the backs love it, and they find a way to flourish. The cool part about everything that you just said too, like how many games they were out.
Yeah.
Go back to like the second and third ranking shows. I think I brought this up a lot during the season. Like, the committee was trying to exit them out as well, because all the discussion was, well, they've had to come back from behind, and well, they just can't hold on to a lead, and well, they have game control. They're not, they trail by 14 in the second half. And I remember thinking, who cares? They're winning games. Like, actually, that shows me a little more about your team, that things aren't just comfortable. Right. So I felt like the committee was actually trying to brush them aside early on as well, and so they overcame that at the same time.
Yeah, which we know, man. It's something where, if you get some type of stigma in that committee's brain or in these voters' brain, it's tough to get out of, because that's just who you are. This year, I think a little bit of benefit of doubt, especially not winning the Big 12. I mean, a lot of losses that happened everywhere else that maybe helped Ohio State and TCU get into their position. You said something that was really interesting that I'm going to segue here quickly for a second, just because you've done so many games. You've been around this sport for so long, and obviously being an offensive lineman, we're some of the smartest people on the field. You said there Michigan should have just ran the football straight down their throat 100 times. If we know that, certainly these coaches who are being paid millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, know that. Why do you think that happens sometimes, where people almost feel like they have to trick their way into a game when it's obvious? I mean, you're the best offensive line in college football. You have a great running back. You have great scheme. Why not just do what you do? Why do people get into that instance where they feel like they have to trick their way to a win?
I go back to my favorite quote as it pertains to football of any coach, any player ever, Ben Leard, my quarterback at Auburn, from Hartwell, Georgia. He used to always say with us in practicing games, he's like, "God, football ain't hard." That's what he would say. Football ain't hard. And you sit back and you think about it, and you have that realization of he's right.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's about making it look hard, and it's about making it look difficult. And, it's some of these teams that run the same play. I had Washington in the Alamo Bowl. And one of the things that Coach Grubb's great at is they will run inside zone 20 times in a game, and it doesn't look the same 2 times.
Wow.
Whether they got a tight end coming flat across in split zone, or they run out a different formation, or they got a receiver coming in motion, or they motion a back out of the backfield. Then they run it. Like, it never looks the same, but it's the same play over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I just think about how many hours go into this.
Right.
These coaches are up there. They don't go home until midnight. They get up there at 4 a.m. They're grinding on tape. All they're doing is sitting there thinking, how can we do this? How can we do this? What's another way we can do this? I think it's plain and simple. It's just outthinking yourself. That's all it is. Yeah. And I had some confirmation from that side. I'm not going to go into detail of who or what they said, but I had some pretty solid confirmation that that's what Michigan was going to do.
Wow.
That it was going to be go between the tackles, that some of the heavier sets, their Rhino and their Mammoth package with an extra offensive lineman and 2 extra offensive linemen were going to be used early on. And then you just don't see it. I mean, I can tell you, I remember in the Iron Bowl, it was the last Iron Bowl played at Legion Field. Jimbo Fisher was our offensive coordinator, and Terry Bowden had been fired. So Jimbo took over play calling. And this was 1998. And Alabama's defense, they were walking their linebackers up in the A-gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and when they didn't walk them up, on the snap of the football, they were flashing to the line of scrimmage. And so they were making any kind of a double team. We were an ISO team back then, so you worked backwards a little bit. And so any kind of a double team coming off combo block was tough because as soon as you get engaged, there's that linebacker right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it really stymied the run game. And so we go into halftime, and I remember I didn't do this very often. I went and found Jimbo because this is my first year starting. I said, Coach, 44 and 43 were our isolation plays. I said, we've got to run 344 and 343. That was our play action off that.
Mm-hmm.
I said, the linebackers are sucking up to the line of scrimmage right away. Like they're flashing down immediately. They're playing fast downhill. I said, the middle of the field's wide ass open.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, all right, first play out the gate. 344. Here we go.
That voice is perfect, by the way.
So we come out. Gabe Gross was our quarterback, who's now third base coach for Auburn's baseball team. And we come out 343. I was like, oh my God, he listened to me. Like, I never thought it would have happened. And he comes out 343, boom, tight end, a little right over the little crosser, middle of the field. And here we go. It's like an 18-yard gain. I was like, we are rolling. We're going to, and I think we were actually up at the half. I was like, we're going to win this game. And we were like 3-7. And we didn't run it again.
He did it so you'd shut up, and that was it.
But I mean, I think one, coaches, and you know this, like people talk about coaches being arrogant, confident, whatever. Like, they wouldn't be coaches if they weren't that. Because if they didn't believe what they did worked, it would never work. So there's a level of that inside of them in their brains that say, my way worked because I wouldn't be where I am. And this would have never been successful before. So that's how we're going to do it. And then number two, I also think that there's so much going on that it's easy to convince yourself that this is how it's going to have to work. And I don't know if Michigan got a look. I don't know if like a couple of things didn't work right away and they got scared, they got timid, they panicked, whatever it was. It wasn't what it needed to be because I think even though if it didn't work, slowing that game down would have been very beneficial for them early on. Like let's just chill. If we just ram this clock down to 0, fine. And it's 10-3, good. Even if we're down, fine. Because those were the two best second half teams in the country, I believe. So I don't know, man. I don't know how that happens, what happens, but somebody's got to be able to say. It's like I tell every coach that I meet, assistant that's going to get a job or getting a head job. The first thing I ask them is, "Who's your FU coach?" And they're like, "What are you talking about, FU coach?" It's like, "Who's the guy that's going to come to you in the middle of a game and say, hey, FU, don't do that anymore,' or we got to start doing this." Or when you're going into your press conferences saying stupid things, you can say, "Hey, coach, FU, stop saying that." We've got to stop. Somebody has a program's best interest in mind that you trust and you'll listen to that can say, "Hey, wake up. No more of that. Stop." And there are so many coaches in so many leagues that would still have their jobs if they had that guy.
They need the FU coach.
They could either say, "Stop saying that," "Stop running that," or "Stop playing that guy." Or all the above sometimes. And they can't find a way to do it.
I understand. Well, let's reel this back in. That was awesome, and I appreciate that kind of exit there as we discuss something very important because I see it too much, and it just drives me crazy. We chatted a little bit about these quarterbacks, and I want to dive in a little bit deeper and get your kind of thoughts on each of these guys. You have two of the most unlikely guys who have led their team. Now Stetson back to back. Max wasn't even in the game to start this season, and being a former walk-on, just always delivers in Stetson Bennett, and now a Heisman finalist, potentially a 2-time national champion. And then, like I said, Max, a guy that, man, before the season wasn't even going to be the guy and maybe was going to get in the portal, but said, no, I'm going to stay and be the best backup I possibly can, thrust it into action, ends up in New York. So just what you've seen from those two guys over these past couple of seasons and how they got to this point.
We, I think it was the 2019 season, we had Georgia, Missouri, and we sat down with Stetson. It was like the second or third game he was starting. It may have been a different game. We had him, and he sits down with our TV crew going into the game, and I just couldn't believe some of the stuff he was saying. Like, he was telling us his story and what he was doing and how he felt about things, chip on his shoulder, and how would you not? Whether it's been JT Daniels, Jamie Newman, Brock Vandegrift, all these other 5-stars that they've brought in, Jake Fromm early on, like, no one's ever given him a chance to think that he was going to be the guy. I mean, think about it. You heard it. You work in the media. You heard it just like I do. They win that national championship last year, and the next day, Twitter is flooded with which 5-star is going to be the quarterback next year.
Right.
I'm like, well, how about the 3-star that just won a national title? Because there's I'll tell you how many other guys in college football there are that have done that. None.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero. So I would take that one. But everybody else, this kid coming in or that kid might transfer. We're going to go get that guy. Try to get Caleb Williams. I mean, so all of them have come in. And, I mean, think about it. Who's the kid that has ever left his school and gone to junior college and that same school is begging for that kid to come back?
Right.
That's never happened in the history of football ever. And so, especially the one that they didn't really want, and that's why he went to JUCO. Right. So I just think it's an awesome story. And some people get bothered by the way that he acts or what he said. You have to have a little bit of an understanding of what he's been through. I just went and found this. I tweeted it out earlier today. 5 postseason starts. He's 4-1, 67%, 309 yards per game, 15 touchdowns, 3 picks. It's amazing.
It's pretty good.
And
it's pretty good.
He has full command of this offense now.
Yeah.
And he's got it's what I think is because there are things about him that are not prototypical or not what we want or look for. Like he doesn't have Anthony Richardson's size or Joe Milton's arm or pick anybody else that you want. Wasn't rated like Cade Klubnik coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Okay, he doesn't have any of those things. We sort of disengage from the things that he does have, and we completely overlook the things he does have. He's got great touch on the deep ball. He throws a really nice deep ball. He can put plenty of velocity on any throw.
Right.
And he's got good touch on say screen passes and touch passes. He can do. He's fine. He's got good escapability, good mobility. Like, he's faster in straight line than people give him credit for.
No question.
He's pretty damn tough too. Like, he's taking some big hits and he pops right back up. And so now he knows how to run the offense. And because he has so many different things that he can do, I think it makes him that much more effective. Now, the only thing that I have seen from him that is a little bit worrisome, there was a point in the middle of the year, probably around the Florida game, where I don't know the exact term to describe it. I've used bored. And honestly, Eric, he looked bored at times because they weren't going to lose.
Sure.
These teams had they weren't competing, and that includes Tennessee. There were good teams that they played in the middle of the season. Kentucky was one of them. And I just think there were times that he went out there and said, God, I just want to throw the ball.
Right.
Like, I just want to complete a fun pass.
Yeah.
And there were a few that bounced right off the breastplate or face mask of defensive players that weren't intercepted. And if you really watched it, you kind of said, ugh. Like, this is kind of high risk, even though it hasn't really blown up in his face. As long as he avoids that, Georgia wins a national championship.
Right.
If there's a point in time in this game, whether TCU's moving up and down the field or he's trying to come up, let's just say there are 2 great plays that end up in interceptions, there's a scoop and score fumble, whatever, and he thinks he has to, overcompensate for that, could get in a little bit of trouble, maybe, but there are a lot of positives in what he does, how he handles himself. I think his little attitude that he's got that some people don't like, I think his teammates love it. I mean, I think they feed off that, and you've had guys like that you played with that you're just like, heck yeah, like, this guy's going to get us going.
That's right.
Like, I love it. So, I mean, I think he's tough. I think he relates to his players. I think he's a winner. He's won. He's proven that, and he's played well in the biggest games.
Right.
As long as he stays,
always
I don't want to say
always.
I don't want to say low risk because that would mean that he's not attempting to hit some big plays down the field. But as long as he plays intelligent football,
right,
and takes calculated risks, Georgia will win a national title.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, I mean, Max is that dude that when we were in like 7th or 8th grade before we really started playing organized football that you picked first every time. You just wanted him on your team. He reminds me of the kid that, is like, well, I've never really played lacrosse, but I'll give it a shot. And then all of a sudden he goes out there and he's like working the stick and like scoring goals. You're just like, what? Like, oh yeah, let's wrestle today. And like he's got the single leg takedown and we can't pin him. And I thought this kid's never done this.
Yeah.
Like he's hitting 3-pointers and pick up basketball. Like, he just reminds me of that guy. Like he's like the ball player that just he's not afraid to try to run somebody over.
Yeah.
He's confident that he can make the throws. He's got good mobility. He understands the system. He excels in everything he's asked to do. And if he does make a bad play, it never seems to faze him.
Mm-hmm.
And like you go watch the second Kansas State game, and that is a guy who is trying to say, hey, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Just let me have it. Like
right.
Shortstop on the baseball team, point guard on the basketball team, quarterback on the football team. Like that's the guy.
Yeah.
That you take out on the weekend that's never played golf and he shoots like an 86. You're like, what? Like, how are you? He's hitting in the fairway every time.
Right.
Like this is not right.
Yeah.
And so you put that together with some elite toughness and an understanding and playing within the scheme. And he's got some good players around him. He's got some guys that can play. I mean, he's got some dudes at receiver. I don't know if Kendra is going to play at running back, and
massive.
I think they got another good one, even if he doesn't play.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a gamer, man, like the ultimate gamer, but has legitimate skill to go along with it.
Sure, and I think he's coming off his worst game, and I think he's going to want to bounce back in a big way. I think that we really see him channel that Big 12 Max that just in that game just took over. I mean, he looked like the best player on any field with the things that he was, or the most important player on any field. And I'm excited to see those two guys who just undervalued, underappreciated most of their career now on the biggest stage. Stetson doing it twice. Let's jump into a couple of individual matchups here because I cannot wait to see this Georgia offensive line go against that pass rush that you mentioned from TCU and just how to target it. They're being exotic. They're doing different things with Horton, big number 98 at defensive end. Winters, was playing like a man possessed.
Oh,
in the
my God, he's
game.
out of control.
So I guess number one, if you're an offensive line, how do you attack that? Because it's interesting targeting. And then number two, do you do anything differently if you're Georgia?
I just think that my approach in this game, if I was Coach Monken and Stacey Searles, I would find the things that my group excels at, is best at. I would make them think as little as possible, and that's the plan that I would take into it. Mm-hmm. So if that meant that, okay, we think we're going to be most successful manning our protection up, and our center says, okay, 6 is the point linebacker, so the right guard and I have 52-6, and you guys work it out from there, and we'll take the next guys on the wing, our tackles are going to have them. Right guard's working with me. Left guard has the next backer, and that's it. Yep. You handle everything else. Mm-hmm. Or if that means sliding the protection, whatever they think they're most confident in and is going to make them think the least is what I would take into this game. Yeah. That's why I think the zone stuff, you got to have it going. We can talk about the run game in a minute because I have some thoughts on why I think it's so difficult to run the ball on them. But from a protection standpoint, you have to solidify it and then just let it go.
Right.
Because it's like we talked about earlier, they make you wrong in so many different ways because you never know with that 3-man front, are they going to add front side? Are they going to add back side? Are they going to add with another end? Are they going to add with a backer? Are they going to add with a rover? And so I think when you start thinking about it and you get stuck in your, no, this is our backer. We have to change it because he walked over there. No, if you just say, no, us two have these two, you two have those two, and the back has him, and quarterback figures out everything else.
Let's just roll, yeah.
You got to make it go like that. And sometimes that's harder, as you know. Man-to-man's harder blocks. It just is.
Sure.
But you got to say, suck it up, Buttercup. It's a national championship game. Like, you block him.
Yeah.
And that's just what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And if it means keeping a back end more often, keep a back end more often.
Right.
So I think that I don't think TCU has a lot of big advantages in a pass rush situation. I think they have more advantages against the run in this game. But if they do get home, it's going to have to be pressures.
Right.
I agree with you. I think Horton's their best pass rusher, but I feel pretty confident the guys he's going to be working against are going to be able to manage it. Now, where that gets in trouble is, again, if you start overthinking and the right guard and the right tackle are working against a 4-eye, which is like inside shade of the tackle, and the guard leaves, and the tackle is just kind of trying to help, and all of a sudden there's some run through.
Yeah.
Like, now you're in trouble.
Right.
So that's where they really get you.
Well, so how about this? How about you go into TCU's defensive line or D coordinator? I mean, okay, you probably also see that on film. Hey, these guys, if we're 1-on-1, they're going to beat us. So what would you do, I guess, with Horton? Are you moving him around? Are you stunning him? Are you trying to get a linebacker on one of those tackles and
yeah, I'm gonna move a lot, and I'm gonna add guys from different places.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna play a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have guys lined up in the A gaps, the B gaps. I'm gonna have my nose guard, Demonic Williams, lined up in a zero nose where he can shoot either A gap.
Mm-hmm.
So I want my center thinking, okay, I need help, but I don't know where I need help.
Right.
All right, so we'll make you get help from both sides, and that's gonna ISO our tackles with our defensive ends. And if we add somebody else, hopefully the guard's trying to go down and help with the nose, he goes the other way. That gives us a run through. So the run through in the run game is what I'd be really concerned about.
Sure.
But I think you just add it from different places. And here's the cool part about Gillespie. I mean, first off, this guy was coaching high school football in 2014. Like, he was a head coach in Stephenville High School. He was Jarrett Stidham's head coach, who just made his first start for the Raiders. I talked to Jared about him. He said he's one of my favorite human beings on earth.
Wow.
Like, just an awesome guy. And thankfully, I had that Stidham stuff to throw on him right before the game, or else I don't think he would have told me anything. He kind of looked at me like, who in the hell is this guy coming up trying to talk to me before the game? And I asked him, I said, okay, I've read all your press conferences for this week. I've listened to you, and there's nothing about adding an extra big against this running game.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no.
Yeah.
I said, so you're not getting any bigger. He's like, we are what we are. We're going to do what we do.
Wow.
He said, if something starts happening, maybe I adjust then. But he's like, I'm going to be honest with you. There's no big adjustment that we have going into this game.
Wow.
I did not believe him still then, and they didn't,
Yeah.
and they had success.
Yeah.
I talked to 2 other Big 12 offensive line coaches that played against it during the week, and they thought exactly what I thought, that if Michigan ran inside zone and ISO, there's nothing they'd be able to do about
Sure.
it, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So from a protection standpoint, I try to confuse. I try to make them wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think what TCU can do is force Georgia to use extra bodies in protection
Right.
and waste those bodies.
Right.
So only rush 3 or 4, keep 6 or 7 in. Because one thing I will tell you, Eric, these dudes can cover, man.
Yeah.
They play cover 0 and they play man a lot.
Yeah,
now
put
they
them
don't
on
show
islands.
cover 0
Right.
like a lot of teams do, but Hodges Tomlinson, he can cover. Newton,
Yeah.
they can cover.
Yeah.
And so they have a lot of guys who can cover. And so I think that's what they like to do is make you think it's going to come from different directions. You keep a guy in, then you waste them. They have guys who can cover.
Sure.
And then they just have these tweeners where, okay, we might green dog and come a little bit late. We might just stay back and help. And then you have like man zone that's going to be really tough to throw into.
Right.
So they're a defense that makes you think. And the more they make you think, the least effective you're going to be.
Right. No question, man. I can't wait to see it just because, it literally can come from all different angles and different looking guys and positions. And, I think Georgia's offensive line, one of the best in the country. And how do they handle that
Absolutely.
with all those, protections and adding guys like you said they've done all year? It's going to be a fun chess match to see. Before I get you out and get a score, give me one more, I guess, skill player matchup. Is it, Ringo and Johnson? Is it Bowers and the safety Bud Clark? You mentioned, Hodgins Tomlinson and maybe Arian Smith coming back. What's one that, man, you're locked in on?
Well, if I'm Georgia, and I mean, I think Bowers is almost a mismatch on anybody, but I try to get him on Johnny Hodges. Johnny Hodges is an amazing story, by the way. If you don't know, 57 for TCU. The kid was he didn't get I don't believe he got a football scholarship offer out of high school. He takes a lacrosse scholarship to Navy.
Yeah.
And then in COVID, the lacrosse season gets canceled. So he's like, well, I'm going to go play football. He was all Met, which if you don't know what all Met is, I didn't either. It's like DC, Maryland, Virginia. And so like you and I were like all region probably or whatever. Like all Met is like all of that.
Bad boy.
I think football, basketball, and lacrosse. He's a great high school athlete. He goes and walks on the football team at Navy. His 2 best games, Tulsa, SMU. Gillespie was the D coordinator at Tulsa. Sonny Dykes was the head coach at SMU.
Not
So
bad.
they bring him in, And now he's one of their leading tacklers and just like a mainstay of what they do. But I would try to get him matched up on Bowers because I think that's where Georgia could have a lot of success.
Sure.
On the other side, it's like you said, just get Quentin Johnson manned up.
Yeah.
Any receiver who has the ability to catch the ball down the field, who tells me that they model that part of their game after Hakeem Olajuwon, I'm all for it. Like, first off, how does a 19-year-old know who Hakeem Olajuwon is?
Right.
I know he's from Houston, but second off, like, understanding how to maneuver the post like that as a big guy, you're going to win a lot. And so I don't care who it is on Georgia's defense. If they're manned up with that dude, and TCU is going to hit some big plays.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even mean throwing it 50 yards down the field.
Sure.
You saw him a little crosser.
Yeah, catch and go.
Max stuck in there. He waited on the pressure, changed his arm angle, comes across, boom, and there it goes. Now, 7, Jordan Hudson, the freshman, had a big block down the field on that play. But it's got to be Quentin Johnson, man. I think he's got to have a big game, and that will be the one that I'm watching. And then, 2, just, DeMercado against those linebackers, if he's the guy tailback and you're not getting your main guy in there and Kendre Miller can't go, he had a big game last week. I want to see if he can have another big game against this defense.
Yeah. Just based on what Ringo did, in the playoff, I've got to think he's going with Johnson everywhere he goes. And, just trying to be that matchup and something that's going to be fun to see. But there's a bunch of them. I mean, we rattled off, 5 or 6 there that I can't wait. So you alluded to it. You didn't bury the lead. You told us Georgia. So give me a score. How confident are you? Give me something of what you think these dogs are going to do for back-to-back titles.
I think it's a little lower than it was last week. I'm going to say like 31-28. I think Georgia gets the win. I do think that TCU's defense gives them some headaches at different points in time during the game, causes some problems.
Sure.
But go back and look at Monken last week against Ohio State. Like I said, first 12 plays, gun, pitching it around, force you to be a little bit looser in the box, and then it's like, okay, now we're going to bludgeon you.
Right.
I do think Darnell Washington's status is big.
Yeah.
Because he just adds a totally different dimension on screens, in the run game, catching the football. Nobody's going to match up with him. So I think if he's not available, which it was weird, he kind of got stepped on from behind.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an ankle. I think it's more of like a contusion deal, so it could be just a pain threshold. If he plays and is close to what he has been, that's big for Georgia for a lot of different reasons. And I think TCU gets theirs. Like they might not go up and down the field like they did against Michigan, but they will get theirs. I mean, you mentioned it. Quinn Johnson, I think quarterback runs are going to go. They're going to force Georgia to defend that. Right. So you'll see some design cue runs early just to basically say, all right, if you're going to try to play 4 or 5 in the box, like we're going to add a blocker and we should be able to get yards. And I think the Georgia defenders have a better chance of winning some one-on-ones up front than they did against Ohio State. Not that Ohio State's guys are that much better. They're bigger at tackle. It gives you a little bit bigger hump to run around. I think that was an advantage for C.J. Stroud. Right. I don't know if Mac's going to have that same advantage in this game.
I like that. Those are all very valid points. So with that, Georgia, back-to-back national champions, where does this put Kirby Smart in the hierarchy of college football? Back-to-back, there's only been 4 teams do it in the Common Poll era with Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Alabama, man. So where does that put him right in the middle of this thing?
I mean, I think he enters the Saban, Dabo, Meyer conversation, and he's immediately in that company just because he has more than one.
Right.
And I mean, you being a Clemson guy and you played on some of those teams, like you saw how long it took for Dabo to really enter that conversation.
Yeah.
It was probably too long, honestly. But now he is, firmly seated on that shelf with those guys. It takes a little bit more for him to start getting into, all right, let's talk about him as one of the best to ever do it. But what makes you think that he's not going to? I mean, it's just that the recruiting is not slowing down. He understands the NIL game. He understands the portal. He's working every angle of college football that allows you to be successful. And he's working them all well. Right. And his guys love playing for him. We were actually, McElroy and I were talking on our show today, like who is going to be great going into next year? Like start thinking about that. And I know our season's not even over, so I kind of hate doing it, but we usually go in and we're like, all right, Clemson, Ohio State, Bama, maybe Georgia, maybe Michigan. I don't even think it's that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a lot of these teams have real question marks. I mean, Alabama's losing their best player on defense. They're losing their 2 best players on offense. They don't have receiver figured out. The O-line didn't look good this year. We've seen Klubnik play, but Clemson's going to lose a lot of talent and a lot of guys that played a lot of football. We don't know how that's going to work out. So I think there's going to be a little more wide open next year, and Georgia included. I mean, anytime you get a new quarterback, it doesn't just always work.
Right.
And, for Alabama it did for a long time. For Clemson it did for a long time. But, for everybody runs into, and for Ohio State it feels like it's worked forever. But everybody runs into a bit of a stopgap where it's like, okay, this is not what it has been. Right. How do we account for everything else?
Sure.
So I just don't know if we're going to have the regular characters have the same amount of confidence that are going to be great going into next year. Yeah. I mean, there's teams like Washington that are going to be really good. USC's probably not going anywhere, but are they going to be able to get any stops? Yeah. Like, Oregon's going to be really good. And Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State's still going to be good. Bama's still going to be good. But, I mean, is LSU going to take a step and be really good next year? Yeah. Be better than they were? I don't know. So I think next year's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I can't
to be honest with you, but I don't think Kirby and George are going anywhere.
I don't either.
For a long time.
I don't either. He's just so impressive, man. And to see all the access that we just have now with their own social media teams, great, conference networks and just the insight they give everybody. It's been really cool to see him, and you feel like you know him. But who knows? It's going to be exciting to see. This was fun, man. It's great to have offensive linemen join and help preview a game. I appreciate your time a lot, and excited for this game.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a good one. I hate that it's over, but I think we're going to get a classic to close it out.
That's right.
Thanks again to Cole for joining us, and just thanks to you guys for nerding out together and talking O-line. It's what the world needs. The world needs more of that these days. But we do appreciate his time. We know he's very busy. And before we get out of here, Mac, we're going to make some picks on this game, and we're going to give you a score. The spread as of Friday when we're recording this is Georgia minus 12.5. I think I would take TCU plus 12.5. That I very much believe in. Now, this next pick I don't necessarily believe in, but it's what I want, so I'm going to say it. I think Georgia is better at almost every position if you just look talent-wise. I would probably take TCU's wide receivers at this point over Georgia. Not Brock Bauer, not the tight ends, but when you look at some of the injuries, I think TCU might have an edge in special teams. They've got a really dynamic returner, so that's something they can look at. And then you've got Duggan, who it's like Duggan and Stetson Bennett. They're two great college quarterbacks, which we haven't seen in this game in a long time, guys, where their career's probably over in college, but and they couldn't be NFL backups. But those are the kind of college quarterbacks I really love. I thought Duggan was gonna had a near-death experience in the Kansas State game. I mean, he was literally going to die on the field, and that's what you want to see. I can't pick Georgia. I just won't do it. And I like the chaos, Mac. I like the fact that we're going to see something that's going to disrupt college football, and we don't have that back-to-back, and it's not boring. And, the whole world is going to be rooting for TCU. So give me the Frogs. Give me the Frogs.
Okay.
I want to go with them. I think it's going to happen. And remember, last year, everyone was picking Bama.
Sure.
I picked Georgia. So I did pick them, but I'm not doing it again. I can't.
How about this? So really, like in your heart, you think TCU can win this football game?
Yeah.
Wow.
I do think they can cover. In my heart, I believe they can cover.
Okay. I like that. I like the cover too. I'll take them there. I do think Georgia's going to win the game. It's just, man, I remember this team week 1 absolutely killing Oregon. And I'm just like, well, this is going to be the easiest college football playoff. This is going to be the easiest thing we've ever seen. And then, they struggled a little bit and kind of found out who they were, what they wanted to do. And something that was very interesting that I just never would have thought of. Number one, I don't cover that conference like that. But Cole kind of mentioned in those games where Georgia struggled, Stetson looked bored. Stetson was like trying to do silly things that he just wasn't himself, that Cole thought he looked bored. And so when he said that, I was just like,
But Mac, how can you be bored in the SEC? It's such a gauntlet every week.
Well, it was Kent State.
Well, and Missouri, right?
And Missouri and Kentucky. So kind of the SEC, like new SEC people, at least for Missouri.
They count.
So they count. Only when SEC teams beat them. It doesn't count when our conference beats them. So with that in mind, I think these guys are going to be so locked in. I think they're just going to be playing at such a high level. Max would have to have the greatest day of his life to beat these guys. And that's hard. It's hard to do.
Teach me how to Duggan.
Teach me how to Duggan. I think the FPI is like 70-30 right now. I think that's about right, which is crazy. So I'm going Georgia to win this thing as much as it hurts me. But I'm praying hard. Horned Frogs, get it done.
And
Texas Christian Community.
To have a team named the Frogs, go get
Frogs
this
and
done.
Dogs. What else would you want?
Frogs and Dogs. It
You know
is
what you
really
would want?
cool.
Go ahead.
It is really cool, Mac, that in a time in college football where everyone feels like they can predict it now because it's just NIL, follow the money, whatever.
Right.
To see TCU in the title game, I think that's great for the sport.
First year head coach, college or a quarterback that wasn't the starter going into the season. Like it's crazy. And you're right. I do love that. All the NIL stuff, all the transfer portal stuff where everybody's like, you got to do it to do this. TCU's like, not really. I mean, you just got to play. You just got to win.
And the portal. And you got to use the portal.
Little portal. I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to be tremendous. It's jacked up for this game. Biggest thing of the season. That's what it all leads up to, KG, and we'll see what happens. If the Horned Frogs can pull off a miracle and get this done, we will surely see. But thank you guys for tuning in. Another great episode, Gramlich and Mac Lane. Big shout out to Cole, our Rock'em Sox guest there. Appreciate his time and coming on this podcast. We're going to get him back in the summer. He was tremendous.
Yes.
Would really love to dive into his career and share more of his story here. But smash that subscribe button as always, guys, over on YouTube. Go over to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, subscribe. We would greatly appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.